Ernie, Gary, thanks for taking the time for an interview today. Wanted to start by giving you an opportunity to get people up to speed who haven't heard anything about Dominion class action before. So, Gary, if you don't mind just introducing exactly what's going on and why are we here today?
Okay, well, for those of you who don't know, back in December we filed a class action lawsuit against several entities, Dominion, Voting Systems Inc., Facebook, the Center for Technology and Civic Life, and some state actors that have been well known in the news. Brian Kemp, Brad Raffensperger, Gretchen Whitmire, other public actors from Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, things like that. And in the end, of course, as we'll explain, it's a class action with regard to the violation of all, really, of our civil rights in terms of every registered voter's right to vote for president and vice president. That's a common shared right that we all have. Really, not the only, but one of the only commonly shared rights that as voters, as registered voters, we all share. Voting generally is left up to the states. That is something that's left up to the sovereign states. It's not an inalienable right. The state, created by the people of that state, pass their requirements under federal regulations with regard to who can be registered to vote. But once you obtain that right to vote, that means you have a right to vote for a president, which is a national interest. So when the state of Texas and other states and their attorney general offices filed their pleadings in the United States Supreme Court, it outlined with specificity the constitutional right violations that the actors of these certain states had committed. So it wasn't hard for us to put our complaint together, since every constitutional right violation was already outlined by these other states. The difference is, and I think the distinction between our case and every other case that's been filed, is that we're not trying to get a sovereign state to do anything. Now, we are going to amend the complaint with regard to the unconstitutionality of some of the laws that were passed before the election. For example, Act 77 in Pennsylvania will be challenging, and that may require naming their governor in his official capacity, but most of the state actors we've named in their individual capacity. So we're not asking the federal court to enjoin Georgia from sending electors to Washington, D.C., or enjoin the governor from certifying their election. If a state actor violates the constitutional rights of, you could say a person, but a citizen of the United States, then that citizen of the United States has the right to file civil rights action against that state actor. Now, there could be issues with regard to jurisdiction and what's the proper court to do it. All of that will work out. So, if you are one person that feels as if your constitutional rights are being violated by another person, and that person's a state actor, well, you can bring an action. So if one person in Alaska, in good faith, feels like someone in Georgia, who's a state actor, is violating a fundamental constitutional right, well then, why can't that one person in Alaska bring a lawsuit against the other person in Georgia for violating his or her civil rights? It happens all the time. So when you have a class membership, and you have hundreds, soon to be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people moving in unison against certain actors, well, you don't just have this one person out there complaining about somebody from across the country. You have thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands, or millions of people all saying the same thing. And so that's what we're all about. We're not trying to tell a sovereign state what to do. Interestingly, the state of Texas can't tell the state of Georgia what to do. 49 other states can't tell the state of Georgia what to do. The electors, strike that, the legislators in Georgia sent their electors to Washington, D.C. and they already voted in the Electoral College, the election is over. But that doesn't mean that certain state actors didn't violate the Constitution along the way. And if those violations were against the rights of others with relationship to the election of the president and vice president, well, that's actionable. That's a violation of a fundamental constitutional right to vote for your president. And that's what this lawsuit's all about.
Thank you. Ernie, do you mind going back on the history a little bit, telling us how you got started in this and also the timeline leading up until this week?
Sure. Well, I think it started out like many people in the country really were. We were following the election. We were all very much interested in the election, months leading up to the election, following it and interested in everything that was going on. And then we all saw what happened on the election night. And we all were left scratching our heads, figuring out what the heck happened on election night. And in the weeks to follow, we just kind of got the feeling that something wrong happened. And the more information started to come out, the more we started to realize that there were rights that were violated. And actually, independent of one another, Gary started with the idea of intervening in the lawsuits in Georgia that had already started. And actually, my background, I'm an attorney from Michigan, so I was actually looking at filing some claims in Michigan along the lines of the Bush v. Gore lawsuits, which I think at this point would be so clear and obvious to prove. Because votes were clearly counted differently in Wayne County, for example, than they were in Berrien County. So that's a very simple lawsuit. But as I'm contemplating that lawsuit, Gary and I started talking together. And Gary said, why don't we join forces and pursue this as a class action across the country? Because clearly Bush v. Gore happened in other places too, besides Michigan. And that's just one of the constitutional violations that we're sorting through at this point. So that's kind of how things came together, and in the weeks following the election, we knew we needed to take some action. And so we wanted to get the ball rolling. We filed a complaint in December 22nd, actually.